The Hizmet movement has achieved considerable success in a type of dialogue, in their dialogue centers and in schools, where there's an openness to opposing ideas and a respect for the other. I originally became involved with the Hizmet movement after I retired, and because of my... That's a knee-jerk response, and I don't find that in the Hizmet movement people have and they do it with such efficiency in automating production that I'm Professor Tom Gage, Professor Emeritus at Humboldt State University. I have been a teacher of every level. I've taught over 50 years. I've taught abroad. I've taught in China. I was a Fulbright scholar at the University of Aleppo in Syria in 1983-84. And I have had a wonderful career. I still am still teaching. But I don't think that there is another program, if you want to call them NGOs, in the Islamic world that is anything like the Hizmet movement because of its comprehensive nature and its duration. We have some wonderful programs in the Christian community. I'm not a Muslim, but I have donated and contributed to peace-building efforts with other groups. But what I see in the Hizmet movement is a quality that is different from other organizations. I think it's a result of bringing together the business community and those who want to serve. For some reason, that just doesn't seem to work as well in the United States. Now, certainly Bill Gates is doing exactly that. And there are many others who have, for the last 200 years in the United States, have done humanitarian overtures that have been impressive. But in terms of my own experience, I just find Hizmet being a remarkable and important contributor to world peace. The Hizmet movement has achieved considerable success in a type of dialogue, in their dialogue centers and in schools, where there's an openness to opposing ideas and a respect for the other. I think that in a way you can somewhat understand what I'm getting at by saying that as we talk in a kind of question and answer situation, I am performing to you, and to the two of us are performing for the audience viewing this videotape. What I find Hizmet achieving through the dialogue centers that are unlike debates is that through this performing to and performing for, one reaches a point where we are performing with one another. And I find this as a qualitative feature of the Hizmet movement. This working together, me a Christian, others are Muslims, Jewish, secularists. We are working really for solving a problem, and that is performing with one another. And I think this is a part of the key of the Hizmet movement. And it creates, especially in education, a quality of teaching that there is not enough of. Because when the teacher and the students are working together and then eventually working with one another, there is an I-thou relationship, in the words of Martin Buber, as opposed to the I-it relationship. Too often teaching, a very matter-of-fact affair where we are teaching science, and then there's the test on Friday, and then the students kind of go their way. I find that the investment of teachers in Hizmet schools and in schools that are part of public schools reach a level of I-thou commitment where the students begin to see another kind of knowledge, I would say a kind of wisdom that doesn't necessarily exist. It exists, certainly. There's a young teacher in Los Angeles, Robert Jeffers, who is not a part of the Hizmet movement, but I've been reading of his accomplishments. He has been involved in teaching in Ceylon. He's been involved in teaching in Sierra Leone. And what he has been able to do with his students is guide them into Yale, guide them into other Ivy League colleges, guide them into my university at Humboldt. This quality of I-thou teaching is rare, but I find it a common feature in the Hizmet schools. I originally became involved with the Hizmet movement after I retired, and because of my history, I wanted to bring into American education a unit of study in internationalism. And my first idea was to get students, especially with the internet, being able to talk with one another. So I set up a series of networks on my university website. I called it cross-cultural fluency, so that students in a classroom in Lycée Renault in Tangiers, they were doing the same homework as students doing homework in Six Rivers Charter School in Arcata. Now, neither one of these were Hizmet schools. I had over 30 schools around the world linked in this way so that students could dialogue with one another. And it really was a result, I think, of my attempt to get this cross-cultural fluency unit of study going, that I was invited to participate in the youth platform that is being organized by the Gülen Institute of Houston, Texas. But I have visited a few schools. I have visited school abroad. I have been in touch with teachers at the Harmony School in Vietnam. I have had some contact with the schools, although I would like to have a lot more. I've been mainly dealing with theory, but implicit in what I am interested in doing is encouraging teachers to work with the ideas of Gülen and James Moffat, who's chapter 8 in my book. Moffat advocated a way of teaching thinking as expressed through writing and through speech. Now, the Hizmet schools I have seen do a stellar job in science, math, technology, and engineering. And these are all very, very crucial. But I like the Turkish proverb, Heterda kalmas seterda olu. Excuse my Turkish pronunciation. But the idea that the pen is what captures what is forgotten in the memory. The idea that information lasts when you write it down. This emphasis upon writing and speaking as an expression of thinking, I would like to see more of that in the science classes, in the math classes, in the technology and the engineering classes. Disaster relief, banking, journalism, education. I'm impressed with what people in the movement do in order to solve a problem. Last spring, when I was in the Senate, in the House of Representatives, in the Rayburn building, one of the teachers whose students took third place in the youth platform came up to me and said, "This is the most remarkable program to bring kids from Bangladesh, from California, from South Korea, 5 countries in Africa, all to Washington, D.C. to see our capital. What's in it for them? What's in it for them?" Well, in a way, we have to ask these questions because we are critical thinkers. On the other hand, that's a knee-jerk response, and I don't find that in the Hizmet movement, people have expectations of results. That's what I like about the charity efforts of Hizmet, that there really doesn't appear to be anything other than a better understanding, and a better understanding is the bridge to peace building. There's been a lot of criticism of the Hizmet movement. I've read on the internet statements about what is happening in the schools. I saw the 60-minute report, and I am interested in the criticism, and I listen deeply to it, and I pursue it as I can to see if there's any grounds. I haven't really found many legitimate objections. I think that the idea that the Hizmet movement and the efforts are too good to be true belies a certain degree of cynicism that efforts in the name of solving human problems can be done because it's simply right to do. There's a wonderful new book by an economist at Princeton, William Baumol, Cost Disease. And I recommend everybody reading this, because what Baumol has discovered is that we have two economies. We have the progressive economy that produces automobiles, refrigerators, iPods, and AK-47s. And they do it with such efficiency in automating production that anybody can buy AK-47 for the price of a chicken in some countries. Now, there's another economy, and that's the economy that Baumol calls the stagnant economy. Not pejorative usage, but a usage that describes essentially how certain kinds of products and services don't lend themselves to automation. And when you look at the list of those vocations, they include teaching, medicine, the post office, hairdressers, dentists, and we're talking about a kind of economy that certainly we can upgrade through some automation, but at a certain point there's diminishing returns. Now, it's not that these areas of education and medicine are so derelict, and that's what's wrong with our politics today, is that both of the major parties attack these kinds of services that are interactive with other human beings as if they're inefficient. That's entirely wrong according to Baumol. I find that what Hizmet seems to be operating on is an intuition that's very parallel to what Baumol is talking about in terms of providing solutions to problems and not being terribly worried about being called inefficient because they're not using technology. I place Fethullah Gulen in the same context as Martin Luther King Jr., in the same context as Nelson Mandela. I find his words the words of an education philosopher.
I think in my mind, one of the things that distinguishes the Hizmet movement is its emphasis on tackling some of the toughest challenges in some of the toughest places. Its emphasis on not just ignoring religion, but embracing religion and interfaith dialogue, making it part of the conversation.